Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, we're talking about the ways that you can use perfume in witchcraft. When we're carrying out our spells and rituals, we often want to layer associations and intentions. This is often why we use crystals, herbs, colours, candles. We use sigils and symbols as representation. These are all designed to add additional energy and association into that particular working. So if you were working for prosperity, you might want to include a candle that is gold or green to represent financial growth and abundance. You might want to be using a prosperity oil to draw things into you, working with sympathetic magic. We might want to be using herbs like basil and alfalfa, chamomile. We may want to be using crystals like green aventurine or citrine that relate to good fortune and prosperity. We might create a sigil to represent what we need, or use the Fehu rune as a way of attracting abundance to us. These workings that we build up are layers of association and energy, and perfume can be an additional layer that we might want to be working with. Now, when I'm referring to perfume, I'm not necessarily referring to only feminine perfumes. This could be aftershaves, this could be body sprays. It is whatever you feel comfortable using, but it represents the fragrance that we might want to be wearing on our skin, as well as the fragrance we might want to apply to our clothes, to our hair, into the environment that we are working in. We can make this quite flexible in how we want to use it. And we don't have to get super specialist perfumes either. We can work with what we already have. It's just about figuring out the notes or the fragrance components that go into a particular perfume. So I have an array in front of me that I'm going to give as some examples as to the way we might want to use things. And the way that you adapt this is very much going to depend on your practice and tradition, so I'd love if you would let me know if you already use perfumes, how you do so in the comment section. Firstly, we can use perfume to help set intention. This might be based off the name of the perfume, the fragrance notes, or maybe even just the general vibe that you get from it. And it's designed to act as a layer into that space, so you might want to wear it for a particular intention, even if you aren't doing active spell work and ritual. You might want to add it into that ritual space, spraying it within the room itself, or you might want to be wearing it yourself as a form of ritual wear. So while you might be getting changed into certain clothes, you might also want to be wearing certain perfumes. So a few examples. If we're going off the name of the perfume, I want to be using something like Karma from Lush. Now, technically this isn't Karma, but I left it upstairs and I really don't fancy running up them again. So Karma by Lush has a lot of patchouli-based notes, but that isn't necessarily super significant. The name Karma in itself can be really useful in setting the intention of balancing the scales, tipping something in your favour or perhaps away from someone else, depending on your specific practice. So that name is really significant. If we're talking fragrance notes, I have another one here. This is Rose Jam by Lush, which you might have guessed it, is very, very rose scented. And so if I wanted to work with, say, Love Magic, I might want to be using something like Rose Jam because of its association with rose. Now, if I was going simply off vibes alone, I might want to be using something like Hypnotic Poison by Dior. This is one of my favourite perfumes. If you've never smelled it, please do. It's incredible. Now, this one, I don't really know the fragrance notes for, but I do know that it's very dark. It's a nighttime perfume. Some might consider it kind of sensually. It fits into that like going on a date kind of a vibe. And so for me, if I were doing any kind of work for romance, for passion, or simply perhaps more darker forms of magic, this perfume can be really useful for setting that dark, mysterious intention. This one could also be really good for divination as well, because it's that idea of going into places that are maybe a little bit more secret, a little bit more mysterious. And while I don't know the fragrance notes of this off the top of my head, I can still use the perfume for that specific purpose. So if we're going to adapt this into your own perfume collection, because I'm sure most people have at least one perfume or body spray or something that they use, have a look at the name of it, see if that resonates with anything, and then maybe smell it and see what you get out of it. Something that is very strongly citrus-based can be really good for kickstarting things, new beginnings, new growth, opening doors, new opportunities, and the like. Anything that is a little bit more earthy and more herbal, you might want to use for prosperity workings. You might want to use for grounding. You might want to use for protection if it is particularly woody. So if it has more of a woody fragrance, we're talking strength, we're talking stability, we're talking protection, we're talking longevity. If we're talking something that is quite green green and quite herbal, you're looking at new growth, new beginnings, prosperity, abundance, good fortune, fertility, anything that's kind of rapidly growing. If we're talking something a little bit more musky or something a little bit like the Dior poisons, where they are a little bit darker, a little bit more mysterious in a way, then we're talking things like divination. You might want to be using it when you're interacting with other people. Perfumes like this can be really good for working glamour magic with as well, but I suppose I can get onto that in just a minute. There are so many different fragrance notes that you might want to be working with that even if you don't know specifically what's in that perfume, you can still be working with it. But if you know the fragrance notes for a perfume, you can take this way, way more specific and work with it like you would herbs. If you use particular oils or particular herbs in certain spells and rituals, you can choose perfumes for that same reason. So this one is Lord of Misrule by Lush, and it contains a lot of patchouli, which is why I really, really love it. So it contains patchouli, it contains black pepper, it also contains vanilla, anise, and these things, to me, all resonate with earthy energies. It's very much getting connected with the ground, connecting with the earth element, connecting with nature. Patchouli for me is a very protective as well as a very earth-based plant. If you've ever smelt it, it literally smells like dirt. Black pepper could be quite irritating if you want to use it in a working for that intention, but it can also be quite grounding. Vanilla is another one that's a very comforting, grounding smell. And so for me, a perfume like this could really easily be used in something that's designed to connect you with home. Perhaps you are away from home and you feel a little homesick and you want to reconnect with that energy again. If you feel like you're floating off a little bit, like your energy is too high, you might want to be using something with fragrance notes like this to help root you back down again. If you are feeling like you want a little bit more protection in that working, I would use this for that as well, because that patchouli and that black pepper for me is quite protective in nature. And so you can work with the specific fragrance notes to take this a step even further. And this is where we get into the idea of spraying it around a room, can be really useful for that, but we can get into even more specifics here. Now, you can take the idea of using perfumes like you would herbs and oils to a whole new level. I have 3 in my collection. These are from Starchild. These are the Tree Wisdom perfumes, and I love using these in spells and rituals. So while a perfume like this or like this might have fragrance notes where you're going to have maybe 5, 6, 12 different plants that are going to make up the fragrance profiles, you can, from specialist places like Starchild, get single plant perfumes. So I have 3 in my collection. I have apple, I have rowan, and I have oak. And I will use these for 3 different purposes. So if I get one of these open just to show you what they look like an oil. They just look like a bottle of oil. And they do not look like your classic perfume that you would tend to buy from a shop. But you open them up and they have a dropper bottle at the top. And you can just take a single drop, boop, and rub it in, and you have the energy of that particular plant that you can wear throughout the day, that you can add into specific spells and rituals. It is an absolutely fantastic way of doing it. So the 3 I have are oak, rowan, and apple. So apple I typically resonate with. Because I work with the tree oghams, I choose plants accordingly. So you might want to do some research on that. But for me, apple is all about abundance, fertility, new growth, new beginnings, prosperity. We're talking about the bountiful harvest of an apple. We're talking about the abundant apple blossom. We're talking about the way that that interacts with pollinators, how busy and bustling an apple orchard is during the spring and summer. We're talking about that energy when I'm working with something like this. So if I was doing any kind of prosperity workings, fertility workings where I want growth and progress, I would work with something like the apple oil. Now, if I wanted protection, I would work with rowan. Now, rowan is a very, very protective plant. We see this in the folk charms of rowan crosses being made. Rowan berry charms are something that I make personally. I have a video on my channel all about that. But same again, we have a little bottle of oil. And this is then so versatile for any time that you feel uncomfortable, any time that you feel like you need to be doing some protection magic, use some rowan perfume. Put it on before you do that spell and ritual. And in some cases, you might want to only wear this when you're doing protection style workings to cement that intention even further. And then the last one that I have is oak. Now, oak is slightly different for me, because this is my birth tree. So I will get onto this in just a moment, but you can use this for strength, grounding, steadfastness, anything like this, you can use oak for. So we can set intentions with the perfumes that we're using. So you might want to use a perfume only in a ritual setting. So say you might want to use the Rowan only when you're doing protection workings. Or you might want to be using something like Rose Jam if you are working with love workings, and put it on every single time you're going to be doing that working. We don't have to be using perfumes just to set intention though. And I will say in this that you don't have to be wearing that perfume to set the intention. It could be sprayed in the space. It could be sprayed on a cushion that you're using in a ritual environment. It could be sprayed on your divination cloth before you get started in tarot, oracle, runes, and whatever it is that you're working with. It could be used by a collective group of people where everyone is wearing the same perfume for a particular working. There are lots of different ways of doing this. It's just about figuring out what works best for you. We can also use perfumes as a way of setting intention in our day-to-day lives. So a little bit like how you might wear crystal jewelry, or you might have specific sigils drawn on you just throughout the day. You might want to be doing the same with perfume. So for instance, with the Rowan, you might want to be using this in your protection workings on a day-to-day basis. So it doesn't have to be something like this, just a perfume that has protective qualities to it, whether that is the name of that perfume, whether it is the fragrance notes of that perfume, something that makes it protective in nature. You might want to be using that perfume in your protection workings to charge it with your energy. Actually use the perfume in itself as the vessel for that protective energy. So people talk about charging jewelry, people talk about charging, like I have pentagrams that I use for protection, different witch bottles and the like that you can use for protection, but you can, in a working, have something like this perfume that is very patchouli based, something that you're happy to wear every single day, have that be the central focal point in your protection working, charge it with all of your energy, and then use it on a daily basis so that you can have protection wherever you go. That means if you don't feel comfortable wearing protection jewelry, if you don't feel comfortable drawing sigils on yourself, you can just be wearing your perfume every single day. As long as you remember to do it, fantastic. And you can do this specifically with something like the Rowan perfume if you want an extra boost to that. Rowan is naturally very protective. It is a plant that protects against earthbound spirits, unwanted energies. It's used really commonly in folk magic, and so really useful if you want to charge this during a working, use it every single day for additional protection. Now we can dive a little bit further still into this, and we can use them specifically in spell techniques. So if you want to be using, I know I'm going to keep bringing this up a lot because a lot of people want protection style magic, you want to use something like this for protection. Fantastic. You haven't charged it for protection though. That's okay, you don't necessarily need to. So if you've created a sigil or a symbol for protection, you might want to take some of the perfume and you might want to draw the sigil on your skin by putting some on your finger and drawing that sigil on your skin. Now you have a sigil that no one can see but you know is there. It is designed for protection and it has been created with this protection perfume. Now, if you don't have a perfume like this and you just have a spray perfume like this, you can do that too. You're just going to have to be a little bit more careful with it. So you might want to draw a sigil on yourself. I do this primarily in eyeliner pens, or you can use eyebrow pens, whatever works best for your circumstances. These are usually water-based, so you might want to be careful with what you're doing. But once you've drawn that sigil on yourself, whether it's on your arm, whether it's on your leg, wherever it might be, you might want to go in with your perfume of choice and just allow some of it to settle onto that sigil. Make sure that you don't douse it with that perfume, otherwise you might find that it starts running off again, but you can use it for that purpose. If you are using a doll in your workings and it's designed to represent you, you might want to be spraying that doll with the perfume that you wear every single day. If there is like a fragrance that you have, like you've been wearing the same vanilla perfume for the last 15 years, then that can be included as a taglock for that working. If that doll is designed to represent your mother or your son or your brother or just someone that you know really well and you know what perfume they use, not only can you use taglocks that represent them in a physical nature, like hair clippings, like photographs, like signatures, you can also use their signature perfume so that you're able to tie it to them even further. Now, you might not want to use this as the only thing that you use, but it can be an additional layer onto it. Now, I know that now people commonly switch out perfumes, but I know, for instance, my nan and my mum actually have always used the same perfume, and so you'd be able to recognize it from a mile off. I tend to switch around a little bit too much for me to do this personally, but if you do have like your signature fragrance, use it to represent yourself. And this also applies if you're doing workings between you and your partner. This could be just your ritual partner, or this could be your romantic partner if you are doing spells together as a couple. Mixing together the fragrances of both your perfumes is a really good way of adding both of your energies into a space, onto objects, onto items, to really connect them with you even further. Now, we don't just have to be using perfumes to, say, represent people. We can be using perfumes on petitions, on sigils. Something like rose jam or something like oak perfume can be used on particular petitions for set intentions. So if you have a petition for love, rose jam. If you have a petition that you want a little bit of strength being added to, like you need strength to carry this out, use an oak perfume. You can dot it around the edge if it is something like an oil-based perfume, like these ones from Starchild, or you can spritz it gently from a distance if you're talking something like rose jam or just a standard spray perfume. This allows you to layer intentions onto physical objects as well in a way that you might already have. So while rose oil might be really, really expensive for you to buy, you might have a perfume that has a very strong rose note to it, and so you could use it for a very similar intention. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting perfume on candles though. So while a standard oil that you might get, you can dilute down and dress a candle with, you're probably not going to want to do that with very strong alcohol-based products like perfumes. You might find that your working will literally go up in smoke, which probably isn't what you're after, so just bear that in mind. We've spoken about setting intention, but you can also do this to work with spirits, deities, and ancestors. You can choose a perfume that includes the name of a particular deity in your workings to help more deeply connect with that particular deity. However, for the most part, they're not going to line up quite the same, so this is where we can go for fragrance notes. If you know that a particular deity is connected with roses, then going for a perfume that has a strong rose fragrance can be really useful in deepening your connection to that deity. You might want to be using it as a representation for them, spraying it around their altar space because you think it's something that they would appreciate. If they let you know that it isn't, then obviously take that into consideration, but you might find that a particular deity really likes certain fragrances. This is why people burn specific incenses for different deities and different spirits. It's often that fragrance and the fragrance notes that are really important. So if you know that a particular deity is associated with, say, the underworld, you might want to be using something like patchouli or even things like black pepper, things that are more deeply connected to earthy energies. If you know that a deity is very associated with fire, then you might want something that is a little bit smokier in nature. A goddess that is representative of spring and of new flowers and new growth, you might want to go for a very light floral perfume. You can take this and adapt this into so many different things, even tying it into ancestors. As mentioned, if your grandmother always wore the same perfume, you might want to be using that perfume as an offering on an altar to her. If you know that your grandfather or your uncle always used the same cologne, you can do the same thing. In this instance, you can treat perfume like an extension of plant magic. And you can then take it further as well, and you can utilize it in your glamour magic. So if you want to come across more confident, you might want to use a perfume that is quite strong and quite forefront, should I say. If you want to feel stronger and you want to draw on energies that maybe you don't typically resonate with, switching your perfume can massively change how your energy comes across and also impact how other people perceive you. And so we can be using perfume in glamour magics as well. And while this might seem like a really specific technique, it can be used in so many diverse ways. Now, I touched on it briefly earlier, the idea of birth trees. Now, if you're looking at the Ogham, you'll find that many trees are related to specific months in the year. For me, because I'm born in July, the oak is actually my birth tree. And so I have an oak perfume that I do use for grounding, for steadfast energy, for strength, for protection, but it's also really useful to use a perfume that relates to your energies directly as a way of amplifying your energies, especially if you are dealing with, say, an opposing energy at that given moment. So For me, I am a Cancer baby, highly emotional, often very highly strung. That's just what I'm like, very heart and sleeve. I feel everything so deeply. And when I am in an energy that is very fiery in nature, that often heightens and almost boils up all of those emotions that I already have and makes it kind of hard to deal with, using something like an oak perfume helps to really cement me back into my own energy again. And it just allows us to balance things out. I talk a lot on Patreon about astrology and the way that they may impact us, and sometimes the way of dealing with it is to counter that energy. If Mercury is in retrograde and you're struggling with communication, you could choose a perfume, sigils, symbols, this goes far beyond just perfume, and adapt what you're already doing to bolster up your ability to communicate effectively. If we are in a particularly fiery sign at that given moment and I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by it, using something like an oak perfume to tap into my own energy more deeply is a way of kind of countering that. And so what should be a very specific style of practice can become very varied and versatile. And so I hope that this was interesting. I hope that it was useful, because it's something I do automatically really on just a daily basis. I don't just do it with perfume either. I know I'm kind of going off on tangents. Body washes, anything fragranced, incenses, body washes, anything like that you use on a daily basis. Choose it based off what it is that you want to manifest. This might be passively, this might be in active spells and rituals. I like getting the Lush body washes because they have a lot of unique fragrances, and I have a bunch that I will just flit through. Every day I just decide what it is I want to be working with. If I want a little bit of a boost to my morning and I'm feeling my energy is quite low, I'll pick something that's citrusy. If I want to be working Magick that day, I might be choosing the Magick body wash that they have, which smells like violets, and it's just incredible. And you don't have to be going for something like Lush, you can just be going for like a bog standard body wash. Choose your fragrances, if you can, accordingly. Now, I will just reiterate here that if you are sensitive to fragrances, you don't have to use them in your magical practice. You can take the same ideas of choosing different plants, different associations, and apply it to other things in your magical practice as well. But I know that perfume and fragrances are something that a lot of people will work with every single day. And so if you already have them in your collection, I think it could be worth applying it into your witchcraft and seeing what works best for you. Oh, one thing I will say about the Star Child perfumes, just before we end, is if you are expecting them to smell like perfumes, you're going to be disappointed. So something like Poison by Dior is created for its smell, right? Everything has been specifically tailor-made for it to smell like this. If we're going for something like Oak perfume, it's not going to smell like a perfume like this because it has one note. That's it. And so it's not a very complex fragrance, and it's going to be very different than what you're expecting. This is quite dark, this is quite sensual, this is quite romantic. This one is quite dark. I just like dark perfumes, apparently. It's very earthy based. There's notes to it. It changes and adapts over time. Something like oak or rowan or apple, they don't change over time because there's no notes that are going to be coming forwards and coming backwards. If you're spraying Lord of Misrule at the start, you might notice it's very strongly patchouli based, and then over time it fades to be more vanilla. That's not going to happen when you're working with something like oak, because it's just one note. So just don't expect something like this to smell as complex or as beautiful as a perfume like this. Instead, it's more about the energy that it will offer. That's more what we need to be focusing on when we're getting single perfumes like this. So with that being said, I hope that you did enjoy this video. Let me know how you use fragrances and perfume in your magical practice. Oh, this also relates to candle fragrances too. I know, tangents, it's me. What were we expecting? If you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a like. It means a lot to me. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them down in the comment section. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. Whew, that was a lot. And with that being said, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're having a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye!